Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Hilary Zwallen.
And I'm Aimee Schreiber. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries.
Hello, fellow Intentionists. Today we've got an amazing show for you. I cannot wait to dive into our interview with Dannielle Bryan. Aimee and I sit down with her and discuss our body's energetic anatomy, the chakra system. We offer tips on how to do your own energy healing. And we're going to talk about how to deal with energy vampires. We've all been in those situations where we've been left depleted by certain people in our environment, or maybe you're working with one, or you're in a relationship with someone who is just sucking you dry and you're just exhausted all the time and you don't know why. So she really digs into what part of this is our own orchestration and why we would attract or pick someone like this. So you're going to want to stick with us through the end of this episode because there's so much meat in this one. And I want to introduce her to you guys before we get started. So she was formally trained as a master practitioner of shamanic energy medicine, and she's also a licensed massage therapist. She's been in practice for over 17 years. She loves diving into spaces that offer more expression and transformation of one's own essence and potential. She's passionate about assisting her clients at all levels of their soul's journey, whether they're just beginning their self-discovery or they're looking for a deeper study and understanding. Specializing in individual client sessions, workshops, retreats, and ceremony, Dannielle is a master at bringing the spiritual and energetic realm into a relatable, tangible practice that is useful and transformational in everyday life. And I can honestly speak to this because she's been my teacher for the last 9 months of this 1-year-long medicine wheel training. And she has really been the one lighting my path and helping me to move into this modality in a way that's been very powerful and very helpful with everything going on in my own life. And she really does have a unique gift in her ability to explain and make sense of all this. So for more information on how to connect with her for private sessions, classes, or ceremonies, you can go to her website. It's www.danniellebryan.com. That's a Dannielle with 2 N's, so DANNIELLEBRYAN.com. Or you can contact Dannielle directly at 435-640-8939 or DannielleBryan77@gmail.com. We will have this information in our show's notes and we'll be saying it at the end as well. So if you listen to the podcast and you just think I've got to get in touch with her, we will provide the information at the end as well. So without further ado, let us welcome our amazing guest, Dannielle Bryan, to the show. Hello, Dannielle. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Intentionists.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I just want to dive right into energetics. I feel like you are like my personal energy guru. And so I wanted to just go straight into what types of modalities you practice so that our listeners understand, your background and what brought you to work in energetics. So if you would just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I work in shamanic energy medicine. So that's the modality of energetics that I practice. And I work through the chakra system, another aspect of energetics in the energy body. And what I do is work with clients one-on-one and or teach groups, take them through the shamanic practice and the shamanic wheel. And I work with looking at our holistic multidimensional selves. So we have a energy body, multiple energy bodies, the subtle bodies. We have our physical body, our mental, emotional, our soul, and our energetic field, our energetic body. And I work within those realms, looking at the issues or situations that are happening with somebody and where they are anchored or etched into the subtle energy bodies so that we can bring healing and transformation to that which we're carrying.
Can you describe a little bit more for our listeners who maybe don't know about the chakra system? Kind of what does the energy body look like? How is it described?
I call it energy anatomy because we all have our anatomy that is energetic. So the chakras are part of that anatomy. And traditionally in the Hindu map, we have 7 chakras that run up the central channel or the central column of our body, right along the spinal cord. And in yoga, they call that central channel the Sushumna. Okay, so we all have these chakras or these wheels of energy. They look like funnels. And the wide end of the funnel is about 2 to 3 inches outside of the body. And the skinny end of the funnel comes into the body and hooks into the central nervous system, right at the spinal column. And we have 7 chakras that are within the human physical body, if you will. So the root chakra is just at the base of the coccyx, or comes right in through the perineum actually, and it points down to the earth. So that's our connection down to the earth. That's what we call the root chakra or the first chakra. The second chakra is just below the belly button and above the pubic bone, so in that soft lower belly. And on the back side, because the chakras that run through the trunk of our body have a front and a back. The back side's at the sacrum, and they call that the second chakra or the sacral chakra. The third chakra is above the belly button, but just below the sternum, so in that top part of our belly. It's the gut, right? We all know about our gut intuition. So that's the third chakra. We have front and back. The fourth, and it's also referred to as the solar plexus. The fourth chakra, the heart chakra, is right in the center of the chest. So not over the actual organ of our heart, but the center of the chest, right in the center of the sternum. Heart chakra or fourth chakra. The fifth chakra or throat chakra is right at the base of our throat. The sixth chakra is right in the center of our forehead, also referred to as the third eye. And the seventh chakra is right in the top of our head, pointing up, referred to as also the crown chakra. And that one points up, which is our connection to source or to spirit. So those are the 7 chakras that we most commonly hear about and talk about in yoga, in chakra therapy, all the books that deal with chakras and learning the chakras. It deals mostly with these 7. In the shamanic path that I've studied, we also work with 2 additional chakras. The 8th chakra, which is about an arm's length above the head, right? So if you put your arms straight up above your head, right at the top of your fingertips there is approximately where the 8th chakra is located. And we work with this chakra a lot in the shamanic realm and opening it up and accessing that sacred source that is our personal sacred space. And we can get more into that later when we're talking about how do we actually work our energetics. And then also there's the 9th chakra, which is not personal to us like the other 8, but it's up in that place of oneness. It's actually the collective chakra, that place where we're all one. That place where there's 3 of us here having a dialogue, but really in spirit there's one, right? So that's the map of the chakras, and everybody has chakras. And so it's part of our energy anatomy. And in the modality that I work with, we work a lot with the chakras.
And are they line up with the energetic meridians in Chinese medicine as well, right? Or it's pretty similar?
It's similar. So they're each their own energetic map. Okay, so in Chinese medicine, or even in Japanese acupuncture, so you have Chinese medicine and you have Japanese acupuncture as well. They work with the meridians, which are their own. They're their own mapping system of energetics. right? Down in Peru, they call them the Rio de Luz, right? So the rivers of light. They call the chakras the ojos de luz, the eyes of light, because they're wells, they're wheels, right? So they're each their own energetic map of our energetic anatomy, but they function similarly in terms of giving us information about what's happening in somebody's body physically and what's happening with them emotionally, spiritually, energetically. So we'll access those maps to get more information about what is happening with somebody.
So thank you, Dannielle. That's such a thorough explanation. And we're done. Yeah. No, just kidding. So, so can you tell us a little bit then, if now that we know the map of the body and the chakra system, how do you access this as whether you're a client or if you're doing your own personal work on yourself, what are some of the things you can do to access these things?
There are a lot of different things you can do. You know, first of all, what you want to do is if you don't have a clear picture in your mind's eye of where these chakras are or where the meridians are, go online and look it up, right? Step one, because it's really important to know that we're accessing that energy center. And the way we can work with our chakras, let's say, is through multiple modalities. We can do meditations where we're actually listening to a guided meditation that's bringing our awareness and our attention to each different chakra. We can listen to sound therapy. Hilary, this is something you're very familiar with. Aimee, maybe you are too, but I don't know. But there is a sound frequency that resonates to each chakra. And so you can listen to sound, which will move through the chakras, and you can access them yourself. So when you get familiar with where they are on your body, which I've just described high level, but again, you can look it up and you can see where they are. You can actually use your hands to access that chakra and clean it out or remove the heavy density or the sludge that will over time collect in that chakra. And it's like dusting the furniture, right?
So it's about bringing awareness.
Yeah. Bringing awareness. There's a modality called tapping or the emotional freedom technique, and that uses the acupuncture points where you tap along the meridians to shift your energetics. So that's a way to actually access your meridians. And again, if you were to look up a map of the meridians, or at least a specific meridian. If you know that you're dealing with, let's say, some stomach issues, you may want to know where that meridian is, and then you may want to tap along that meridian point. Obviously, if you really, really want to get into an in-depth level of working with these energy systems and you have something really specific going on, working with somebody who's trained in the modality is also great, and then you can learn the techniques that are specific to you that you can take home and work with.
So for you, Dannielle, what would you say to people who are wondering, are these literal energy centers to work with versus kind of a metaphorical framework for understanding aspects of yourself? What do you say to people who may be skeptical of or unfamiliar just with the idea of energy that can actually be worked with in the body? Mm-hmm.
Well, first, Aimee, I'll say that they're not metaphorical, they exist. They absolutely exist. And we can go back and start reading on the history of meridians, reading on the history of chakras, and this goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And so this is part of the energy anatomy. This is why I chose that terminology. I mean, you'll hear it out there too. I did not coin the phrase, but.
And when you say energy anatomy, is this another word for basically our soul, right?
No, our soul is different. This energy anatomy means just like you have a liver and you have kidneys, right? You have chakras and you have meridians, I mean that
Okay.
it's literally a part of your energetic makeup. They exist. Okay, so we can start there. It's not metaphorical. Now, layered on top of it, because everything is multidimensional, we can get into the emotional or archetypal energies that each center deals with, or what the meridians deal with. I'm much more versed in chakras than meridians, but I know that there's a mental emotional component to every meridian in Chinese medicine, and they also work with the elements. And in the chakras, we work with the mental emotional components, the psychological components, if you will, and the archetypal energies. So, Aimee, to get back to your question, what would I say to somebody who is interested is I would begin to explain the map of the centers and talk to them about how they have most likely in their life experienced working with these energy centers. To the naysayer, are they interested in a dialogue, or are they steadfast in their belief system that it doesn't exist? So you start to engage in that conversation and see where does it want to go. But we all can relate to an experience where we have walked into a room where an argument may have just been happening, but it's no longer going on. But you walk into the room and you feel those energetics, right? You know something just went down. And you may not know all the details, but you know that it was charged and it has a feeling of heaviness or a thickness or upsetness in there, right? And what is giving you that feedback is your energy body, your energy anatomy, coupled with your intuition, but you're feeling it. You sense it when you walk in the room. And and it's not just in the negative. You can sense walking into a room where something really exciting just happened, right? And you're like, what's going on in here? What? Tell me. And so that through picking up information through your energy body. And that's what the chakras do. They are these vortexes that help us process energy. There's always information moving in and out of our chakras.
Right. Thank you for that. I think that the only way for people really who are interested to learn more about this stuff is to actually try it, especially with someone like you who is practiced in dealing with these energy centers. I've been to a practitioner of Jinshin Jitsu before, which deals with the energy meridians too. And it was pretty interesting and amazing, even without me knowing what the stuff meant that she was doing. The physical effects in my body were noticeable. So can you give any, without giving too much information that's personal, some client examples of things that they've experienced, maybe with you working with their energy?
Yeah. God, 100 just rushed to my mind, right? It's I'm like, where to go with this? Yes. So I have worked with divorce. All right, divorce is an interesting one because what happens when we get married is we get married in ceremony, which is very energetic. And that's what we call it, a wedding ceremony, right? So ceremony, it reaches us on an energetic level. And so when we get married to somebody and we make those exchanges of vows, that's using our language, but we're energetically entangling with somebody. And I mean that in the highest sense, entanglement, right? And what happens when we get divorced is we do the legal aspect of divorce. We divide assets and finances and houses and material things, and we draw up these papers called the divorce decree, and it comes up with, this and this and this, and this is how we're going to operate from here on out. Okay, so that all happens legally. and on a literal physical level. But what doesn't happen is the unbinding, the unentangling that happens energetically. So I have worked with a client who was 6 years divorced, but still felt absolutely bound to her ex-husband, felt like everything he did and said still had this really huge effect on her. And how can this still be going on this many years later? I'm in a new relationship. What is happening? So we go in and I looked through her energy body and went through her chakras, and there was a cord. And a cord is another energetic attachment that we have with somebody who we have close personal relationship with. Right. And for those of us who are parents and have children, we can all relate to that tie, right? We even use that language, like that tie that we have with our kids or our parents or our spouse, right? So they show up energetically. You can sense them, you can feel them, and they look like ropes or cords. So she still had this cord attached to her ex-husband. And we went in and we ceremonially cut that cord, meaning we did it with reverence and honor, right? This isn't about like, I hate you and you're a horrible person. This is about, there was a time in life where they came together and wanted to make their life together. And for whatever all the reasons are, that was no longer in alignment and they went on their separate ways. But that energetic tie or cord was still there. So we cut that cord to allow her to no longer be in that energetic entanglement with him.
So how did you cut the cord?
In a session, I have a ceremonial piece of flint that I use that is shaped like an arrowhead. So if you will, it's like a knife. And I actually go in, you have to palpate for it. You have to feel for where this energetic line is, and then you actually sever the energetic line and then bring healing back to the body and allow for that healing to happen in space and time between her and the ex-husband. But that's how, technically, that's how I do it. Energetically, what's happening is we're cutting off that attachment, that tie.
So that is interesting. And I'm wondering, just to dovetail on the idea of cords, like you talk about, there was a divorce. Obviously, they came together in love. There was a cord that was made in love that needed to be cut. Now, what about energy vampires, right? We've heard of this term floating around, or what, some people will call people eaters, or just those, those people that leave you feeling gutted when you're done talking to them, even when maybe they didn't have a personal attack on you. You're just like, what happened, right? So can you talk a little bit about energy vampires? And I know we could do a whole episode on this, but just how do you know if you're connected to an energy vampire, and what do you do to cut those cords?
Energy vampire. So the word vampire, right? We all conjure up the archetype of what that is, right? It's somebody that comes in and sucks out your life force energy. In the movies, they actually feast on your blood, which is what? Life force energy, right? So it's energetically the same exact thing. It's the person who is sourcing another's life force energy for their own sustainability is technically what's happening. And how do we know we've encountered somebody in this capacity? Because you feel exhausted when you leave the scenario or the situation, or you get off the phone or what have you. You're done with your engagement with that person and you're tired, and you're thinking to yourself like, oh my God, I am so drained after having that conversation. That is a very, very clear sign that you've just encountered, quotations, an energy vampire, right? And what you do is clean your field. I suggest that you drop in to your field. And when I say drop in, I mean close your eyes, take a deep breath into your belly, and move your awareness into your body and sense where you feel the heaviness or the depletion. It will show up most likely as one of the two. And you can feel it in your chakras. That's where you're going to feel it. And you can rebalance that chakra by spinning it clockwise, okay? So you take 2 fingers and you dip it into the well of the chakra, if you will. Remember, they're like funnels sticking out of the body, so you can actually dip it into that well. And then you want to start making circles that move to the left of your body, okay? If your head was 12 and your pelvis is 6, you want to move clockwise, so that is to the left. And you can rebalance that energy center, which is going to revitalize your own energy field. That's one quick way, Hilary, of how do we work with the fact that we just got zapped, right?
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about, and that sounds more like if you've encountered someone maybe like in your place of work or maybe an acquaintance, but what happens if you are in a relationship with an energy vampire? It doesn't usually start out that way, or maybe it does. And then also, or like if you work for an energy vampire, right? I feel like there are people that are in relationships where that's going on and they feel stuck. So is there anything you can say and speak to that?
That's a big one. We could spend the rest of the time talking about this, just like you said.
I know, it's true.
But high level, if you are in relationship with an energy vampire, in whatever capacity that is, if it's in your personal, intimate relationship, if it's in your working relationship, or somewhere in your family dynamic, okay? These are 3 big centers where we want to take note. And this is when the lens has to get flipped. Because, let's say the boss is an energy vampire. Okay, but what part of this is your own orchestration that you are working in an environment for an energy vampire? We want to start to look at the bigger pattern that's in there, and we want to look at what you bring to the equation. Because like you said just a few minutes ago, all right, we're at a party and we run into somebody. We're at work and one of the coworkers walked into our office and we had this encounter, right? But we're looking more chronically, if you will, at a scenario of being in relationship with an energy vampire. Where do you allow yourself to have your life force energy siphoned? Where are you giving your power away? Where are you staying in relationship with this dynamic because there's some kind of secondary payoff? And what I mean by a secondary payoff is somewhere along the way, there is some kind of benefit to stay in this long-term engagement that is seemingly unhealthy. And we would really want to start to dive into what are those parts and pieces, right? That's the best thing you can do to protect yourself. Otherwise, you are going home at the end of the day and you are exhausted and you're having to work with your depletion. You're having to refill the coffers, and now you're managing a pattern that you're in. You can come home and refill the coffers, right? You can take your sea salt and soda bath. You can rebalance your chakras. You can do your meditation. But now these practices become management for an unhealthy pattern that is actually existing.
That you're potentially calling in because you have... There's a mirror that needs to happen for you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's a mirror that is happening for you, meaning it's being reflected in the relationship with this person that is asking you to look at where you are allowing for these kinds of engagements to continue happening. And more succinctly said, somewhere there's probably a lack or a void, or there's a core wound that wants to be addressed. And when we address those aspects, then we find ourselves able to step out of behavior that is unhealthy for us or depleting for us.
So it all kind of goes back to disconnecting from this victim triangle, which I think you're the one who told Hilary about this, and then she shared it with me, and it's been a really helpful concept.
Yeah.
in noticing what kind of negative patterns you're encouraging in your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, the victim triangle or the disempowerment triangle is another archetypal energy that exists that's made up of the victim, the rescuer, and the perpetrator. And they all hold their own archetypal energy, right? If I say to you, that person is a classic victim, you're going to conjure up an idea of what that means. And you're going to nod your head and you're going to go, yes, they are, right? We don't even have to get into the details of what that means because we all know what a victim is, right? The rescuer is the one who's coming in to fix it, right? And make it better with or without permission. Now, what does a rescuer need? A victim. Right? So what happens is if we're in rescuer mode, we are pinning the other person into that point of the triangle as victim. And then the perpetrator is the bully, if you will. It's the one who makes everyone else bad and wrong and is going to make it very loud and clear that you are bad and wrong. And what's on the other side of that is typically the victim. Okay, so when we recognize that we are engaged in this behavior, let's use the person who works in an environment whose boss is an energy vampire, okay, because this is what we're talking about. So this person goes to work every day, shows up in the office, the boss an energy vampire, they feel completely drained and depleted at the end of every workday. They probably are going to develop a feeling of being the victim at work. Like, God, why do they always do that to me? It's so exhausting to be there. I need to go have 45 modalities every month just to feel better. Now I'm spending all this money and I hate my job. They are clearly on the triangle, right? And they're engaged in that archetypal behavior. So when they can recognize that they no longer want to be engaged in this behavior, there's a consciousness shift where they can extrapolate themselves out of that dynamic and then begin the healing process of why do I keep attracting these energy vampires, right? And an energy vampire can have different flavors. You know, one example of an energy vampire is the one who is always the consummate victim, right? Who always needs help, and you land in the role of being the rescuer, and they're always needing help, and it's so draining. Like, we probably have all had an experience in our life with that one friend who's in trauma, and we see their number flash up on our phones, and we go, oh no, like I can't do it right now. I don't have it in me, right? And that's an energy vampire in a different kind of way. And then there's the energy vampire that has to steal the show and one up everything and tell you how to do it. And they're draining your energy in another way. Or another one that sees your magnificence and your light and wants to ride on your coattails. And every good idea you come up with, they're jumping in and making it theirs and running away with it, right? That's another kind of energy vampire. So they have their unique flavors that, you know, each one holds all kinds of information for us if we're willing to take that look and say, okay, time out. What the heck is going on my side of the street? Right. Where am I a contributor to this pattern that's going on?
So as far as someone who's a practitioner of energy, kind of stepping into maybe an unhealthy rescuer role, is there anything that you would tell someone who's interested in working with energy healers to be aware of? Like, how do you know what kind you should choose, and how would you go about finding a good one? Yeah,
that's a fantastic question, Aimee. Well, there's a little bit of trial and error in there, right? Because how do you know until you step in and engage?
Right.
Word of mouth from a credible source is always great. How do you go about choosing one? Start asking people, hey, do you know a good so-and-so, right? That's a great way. And ask multiple people and see, is there one name that keeps popping up? You know, ask them why they liked that person. Ask them how it was helpful for them. Here's some things you want to look at. The rescuer it can be synonymous with the wounded healer. Okay, the wounded healer is somebody who recognizes that they've got stuff going on. They embark on this journey to sort their own stuff out, and they love the modality that they found, and they loop into it, and now they're going to go out and help all these other people. But they haven't quite cleared their wound or their imprint wholly. So they begin trying to heal through their clients. So, you know, and how do you know this? I don't really know how you're going to know this, except to really pay attention to if the practitioner you're working with is helping you chart or map a healed course. They're helping you to find your way into cultivating more of what you desire. That's actually what I would say is the number one subtlety that you want to be looking at. If you are spending all this time swirling around in what doesn't work for you and swirling around in the wounded place, and you keep trying to just process and regurgitate the 452 ways that that pattern comes up, and you're not moving out of it and looking for what you want, then you're operating with somebody who's keeping you in that place. And they're not actually moving you into an empowered, healed state. I cannot heal my clients, but I can facilitate their healing work and help them chart a course of what they actually want. I am much less interested in working out the garbage. I need to know what the garbage is so we can get to the root of it, and we can see where it's bound and why it's being held and what the belief system is around it and all the contracts that we make with ourselves to keep our garbage in play. And that's what we actually want to shift. But what we all really want is the yummy. That's what we want. And if you're not moving there, you're working with the wrong person.
And what do you mean by the yummy?
I mean that we're all looking to land in a place where we feel like we're in alignment with our lives, that we're in a place where we are able to be expressive of who we are and that our inside and our outside match. That we're not backbending around one arena of our life that doesn't work and trying to do all this orchestration around accommodating it, but we're actually moving towards a place where we feel at peace with who we are. We feel at peace with how we express in the world and the thing that we're doing in the world. We feel like we are authentically engaging our life and our relationships, that we have this dream that we want to move towards, and we're seeing more and more of it come into fruition. I mean, that's yummy, right? 25 years in therapy is not yummy.
Right.
No, that's a really great litmus test. And it seems kind of obvious now that you've said it, but it's like, do what is actually working. Do what's actually moving you in a positive direction versus keeping you trapped.
Right.
That's great.
And there's a lot of, every person who works in a modality has probably cycled through their own place of recognizing where they are healing their wound, right? And the crux, my formal training as a shamanic energy medicine practitioner was through an organization called the Four Winds, which is still in play, and they're wonderful. And I am so grateful every day for what I learned in that work, which is that we must do our healing work and our shadow work before you step into an arena where you are facilitating other people moving through their healing work. Because if we are unwilling to look at our stuff and look at all our limiting beliefs and look at all those aspects of ourselves that we want to pretend don't exist, and we keep shoving it into the background, it will play itself out, I promise you. And if that practitioner who you're working with has not done their personal healing work and has not gone in and looked at all their own shadow places, then there is a tendency for it to be projected into their practice.
Well, and I'd love to speak to this really quick because I'm training with you in all of this stuff. And I know we're going to have Dannielle back again to talk about shamanism specifically, but I really wanted to just speak to how, I mean, really, it's such a rewarding, doing this medicine wheel and this training that I'm doing has been so rewarding, but man, it has been really painful because you have to dig into the places that you haven't wanted to look at. And it's not always the funnest, thing doing your healing work, like really showing up and doing your healing work rather than just checking the box. Like I went to the therapist or I got the massage or whatever it is that, if you're really committed to, I'm trying to understand my part in all of the pain I've had in my life and whatever the pain is. I mean, it's an interesting experience.
Yeah, there are some pockets that are challenging, right, Hilary? And it's that place where, I mean, it is not for the faint of heart. That doesn't mean that it's only for a few people, right? But it's just to recognize that you will come up against the very edge you've been orchestrating your life around avoiding. That plain and simple. You're going to come right up to it. And if you're willing to move through it and to really look at our part and parcel in the dynamic, there's so much beauty and richness in there that is beyond what we can even begin to imagine for ourselves. That is where our growth really happens. And that's where we begin to cultivate that internal place of power, because we take those wounded places and we bring them through a transformation that becomes our greatest source of awareness and compassion. And we begin to recognize that everybody is on their journey, but not for the faint of heart. It is definitely can bring us right to the edge of the abyss where we're thinking like, no way in hell am I going.
Right. So speaking of the edge of the abyss, I know you had mentioned that you really come across your shadow in anytime you delve into energy work. Can you say a little bit more about that and kind of how energy healing fits in with modern psychology and kind of what's the difference? What are you going to get from an energy healer versus a psychologist? And or are there great similarities between the philosophies?
The similarity is going to depend on your psychologist, and it's also going to depend on the specific kind of psychology that they practice, right? So for instance, Jungian psychology is very much about the shadow and the archetypal and the energetics. And so there's different levels of engagement that we can all look at in different language for the different levels of engagement. Remember in the beginning, I was talking about our multidimensional bodies, and we have our physical body, we have our mental, emotional, subtle body, our soul, subtle body, our energetic, subtle body, right? So if we're looking at the literal body, the physical body, the language is the molecular makeup. It's the structure of our physical body. And the modality practitioner are doctors who really understand this. The intervention is physical, right? Like you break your leg, you need to go in and have it casted. The psychologist works at the symbolic level, addressing the mental, emotional, using the language of words and symbology. And that helps us, the intervention's emotional, and it helps us understand, right? Because we are logical reasoning beings, right? We want to understand. And so that helps us, that gives us a way to start to connect some dots and understand, but it's operating. We want to recognize that it operates at that mental, emotional level. The shamanic practitioner works in the language of images, ceremonies at the level of the mythic and the soul. So in my training, we talk about how shamans are map makers, and we work at the level of the mythic, which is not the logical reasoning place. Hilary, you hear me say this over and over and over, that when we step into the mythic realms and the energetic realms, that is not an arena where 1 + 1 = 2, right? So
right.
It doesn't matter what we think it is always, because the energy body, the mythic aspect of us, could be playing out an entirely different archetypal story. And we want to access from that mythic place and that energetic place. So the shaman's going to work with the energetics. So the psychologist is going to work with understanding the story and the cause and effect down a linear timeline that says, this is what happened to you, therefore here you are in the present, and here's the probable outcome in the future. Like the shaman steps outside of that and says, yes, those things are true. And where is this held multidimensionally, energetically etched into your field that continues to attract into your life the cause and effect and probable outcome? And so when we shift it to the energetics and we can access that level, we can really buff out the program, so that the program is no longer laid down, so that we don't have to keep operating in that same pattern. So it's really helpful to work in all modalities if we're dealing with certain kinds of things, certain kinds of trauma. It's helpful to have that understanding, that mental, emotional understanding, so that we can step into the energetics and really allow it to shift.
So it really depends on where the client is and what's calling them at the moment, or what's in front of them, and in terms of who could potentially benefit. Dannielle, we've got to wrap up here in a minute, but you're such a wealth of knowledge. This has been so enlightening and interesting. I wanted you to discuss how our listeners can get in touch with you. You're located in Utah, but I'm in California, and you do remote sessions on me often. And, just tell our listeners a little bit about how they can reach you, and so they can get in touch with you if they want to do a session or work with you.
My website will be live and functioning come beginning of April. So you can go to DannielleBryan.com, and that's Dannielle with 2 N's. So it's DANNIELLEBRYAN.com. DannielleBryan.com. Of course, you can reach out and contact me via telephone at 435-640-8939, or email at DannielleBryan77@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you, Dannielle.
It's been so wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I love talking about it. Obviously, we could go on and on and on.
Right. And never fear. Just like Hilary said, we will be having another more in-depth discussion with you, hopefully soon, about modern shamanism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for our listeners, go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or iTunes and keep an eye out for that. And tune in next week for the final episode in this Be Your Own Healer series, where we will discuss mindful eating and the physical body. Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.